Greetings, Gilliam the Rogue here once again, back with a build video. Today we'll be talking about the updates to Stamina Nightblades in Horns of the Reach. This will not be a full build video. I will not be going through everything. You can refer to the Morrowind build video if you are looking for a very in-depth explanation of ability setups, and most of the gear stuff is really relevant, as well as the DPS parts. Nothing has changed in those regards. The only changes that have really gone through are CP, traits, and some gear choices. So let's begin. First, we'll talk about traits on our weapons. So, Infused Main Hand, always going to win, no matter what. Make sure this is enchanted with a poison damage enchant, as such. This is going to be by far the best setup. Ideally, you have a dagger for most scenarios. On pure single target, it can be an axe. Always, always, always have this in your main hand, regardless of single target or AoE. The damage that this thing produces is astronomical, and it is currently bugged and has been for the past 3 months or so, where it is applying to all enchants, including our Maelstrom bow and our offhand in terms of cooldown reduction, but not potency. So it has a very high efficient rate, and we're just stuck into using it until it gets fixed. Even after it's fixed, it will likely remain BIS due to how much power this enables via the poison enchantment. Next, we have another dagger in our offhand. This will be enchanted with a Berserker enchant to enable lots and lots of weapon damage. Again, Infused will apply to the cooldown reduction, so it has a 5-second ICD instead of a 10-second. However, it's still not going to have 100% uptime because we are bar swapping on our back bar far more frequently than enabled. There's no way to have 100% uptime on Berserker while still pulling competitive DPS due to the importance of our back bar. For traits on this weapon, Sharpened is ideal in most situations when you are not attaining penetration cap. Anytime you are at or below 16,000 penetration, you want to have Sharpened. If you are above 16,000 or you are penetrating to 0, then you do not want Sharpened at all, and instead you will use Precise if you are in a group with lots of aggressive Warhorns, or Nirnhoned if you are not. Now let's talk about our Mundus Stone. So Mundus Stone, Warrior. Warrior wins hands down any situation for all Stamina DPS due to over-nerfing of Thief and Shadow. There are currently no builds in which Thief or Shadow will beat the Warrior. If you are purely solo and you do not have access to Major Fracture, which as a Stamina Nightblade we do, you will want to use Lover. If you decide not to use any penetrative sets or would like to use CP points anywhere, you can also use Lover, but remember that you will easily reach a safe value of penetration or armor reduction where Lover becomes mitigated. So don't worry too much about running it, but you totally can. The benefits of Warrior far outperform any Mundus Stone. In terms of overall DPS production, it is the best, as well as overall healing production for ourselves. So Warrior works really, really well. Plus, it works against shielded enemies, which there are some in Maw of Lorkhaj, Ruins of Mazatoon, and Halls of Fabrication, allowing the DPS to work in all situations where Thief and Shadow may not. Shadow has been over-nerfed into the ground, so we can't really use that even as a Khajiit where we have tons and tons of weapon crit and with the access of Precise. So stick with Warrior in all situations or use Lover if you really want that pen. Now let's talk about traits on our armor. Divines on all pieces remains ideal no matter what, even with the changes to using Warrior. In terms of the mathematics, we always get the most out of it because we have way more sources of percent amplifications to weapon damage accessible to us than stamina. If you are a red guard, you might notice Infused winning in some situations due to its resource management advantages since you have more resources to cast from, plus synergizing well with the Undaunted Metal passive, which gives you 4% of your stamina every time you use a synergy, so you can use Infused on big pieces. Also, if you plan to use a max health enchant because your health is a little bit too low for your liking, definitely go with Infused on there to get a little bit more bang out of that. As for traits on our back bar, we will be using, again, Sharpened in most situations. If we are reaching penetration cap, then go with Precise will likely win in most situations. I have also heard that Infused on a Maelstrom bow pulls the highest DPS by roughly 100. I have not been able to test this since I do not have access to that, so keep that in mind that there is potential for Infused on the Maelstrom bow to work. Otherwise, in terms of what I do know, again, Precise will likely win in most situations. Otherwise, Sharpened if you are not at pen cap, and Nirnhoned works as well. In terms of rotation, again, nothing has changed, and we've actually been given a little bit more of a difference in rotation. Instead of always having to cast Poison Injection last in our bar if we were using the set Hunding's Rage. We don't have to do that anymore because now Poison Injection will reflect based on our stats. So before, if you ran a really high damage, low sustain setup of 5 Hunding's Rage and 5 Twin Fang Snake, you had a lot of damage potential, but you had to make sure you casted Poison Injection last in your rotation and then bar swapped immediately so that Poison Injection got Hunding's Rage 300 weapon damage. As of week 2 or week 3 of Horns of the Reach, that is no longer necessary because Poison Injection will now update based on percent health changes as well as weapon damage and stamina stat fluctuations. So we don't have to worry about that, and we can have a much more fluid, easy to use, and diverse rotation that allows us to have more AoE potential and a much higher uptime on Poison Injection. So keep that in mind that if you are running that Hunding's Rage setup, you don't have to cast Poison Injection last. You can cast it right after an Endless Hail and then continue to do Razor Caltrops or Leeching Strike. So your back bar rotation, instead of looking like this, will now look something a little bit more like this if you choose. So you do have a little bit more freedom in terms of where you cast Poison Injection, so it's a lot better now in terms of that. So let's talk a little bit more about gear changes. So currently, the best DPS production for solo application is 5 Twin Fang Snake, 5 Hunding's Rage, and then 2 Monster Set depending on content. So you're going to want to have Twin Fang on your jewelry as well as 2 body pieces, and then Hunding's Rage on 3 body, and then 2 weapons. Again, since the Poison Injection change, you don't have to worry about losing that damage on your Maelstrom bow because now it will update when we swap back to our front bar. Now that Maw of the Infernal can no longer crit, we will not be using that. It still pulls decent DPS and does give us max health, so if you are looking for a max health DPS set from Undaunted because you need that extra HP to survive, then you can use Maw of the Infernal, especially in a group with a lot of spell penetration as well as Engulfing Flames. He'll do a lot of DPS then. But in terms of overall DPS, 2 Crags works really well in single target when you're not attaining penetration cap. 2 Veladreth works in a lot of great cleave situations and will not become redundant. And then Spawn of Mephala will be ideal if you find yourself heavy attacking a lot or in large AoE clumps. So kind of choose between those monster sets in terms of what you like. And then again, 5 Twin Fang, 5 Hundings. Now, if you are in a group with lots of penetration, you do not need to run Twin Fang, and you can instead run another damage set as you so choose. I really like Vicious in terms of efficiency. It brings Minor Slayer, it has tons of crit, it has weapon damage, and it has sustain, which is one of the most important things after Morrowind, even moving into Horns of the Reach. So I personally, instead of running Hunding's Rage, use Vicious Ophidian. We don't get as much weapon damage out of it, but we do get quite close to it as we look. We get the same 2 crit bonuses, we get 129 weapon damage, we lose a little bit of stamina in terms of max stamina. We lose roughly 170 weapon damage, but we gain tons and tons of stamina on kill, 8% cost reduction, which means less heavy attacking, more light weaving, which means more DPS, and then a burst of stamina and movement speed upon kill. So yeah, Vicious Ophidian is what I prefer, especially since I don't like heavy attacking as much, so I usually pair that with Twin Fang Snake if I have access to it and I'm solo. Otherwise, if I'm in a group, I wear Night Mother's Gaze or Sunder Flame, depending on what my group mates are wearing. Otherwise, if you don't have access to either of those and you want to be, have like a poor man's Twin Fang, then you can definitely go with Spriggans as well. You have lots of gear options. In terms of Briarheart, now that the Poison Injection change has happened, that kind of does boost its viability a little bit, now that we won't be losing that damage when it applies, because it will update based on stats. You can try using Briarheart. I don't have access to the gear just yet that I'm confident in saying it's decent, and plus Poison Injection is the only dot in our kit that does that. So if you apply, say, Rending Slashes and then Briarheart procs, Rending Slashes will not get the weapon damage out of Briarheart. So I really don't like the volatility of Briarheart, and it's why I usually don't suggest players to run it. Plus the heal is not worth in terms of saving our life. 600 health per second, it cannot crit, it has a 1 second internal cooldown. The amount of healing that we get out of it is not going to save our life compared to something like Leeching Strikes or Vigor instead. So it's really not all that great, and even if you paired it with those, you're not going to notice a difference so much. So I don't really suggest Briarheart. You can use it if you do like having that potential to get really good DPS, but a lot of the times you're not going to have that happen, especially on high mobility fights where it might proc right as a boss becomes invulnerable or you need to run to do a mechanic. So Hundings is preferred to Briarheart in my opinion. Next, we'll quick cover CP. Now, I'm only going to give solo application for this because CP is very, very versatile, and there is no real answer to what's best because it's constantly changing depending on check marks or things that you should be looking at. So group penetration, group buffs, what kind of content you're doing, etc., in order to find out what optimal CP is. Now, if you are purely solo and you're doing like a boss in like a dungeon fight or Maelstrom Arena, this will most likely be ideal, assuming you are running 5 Night Mother's Gaze, 2 Crags, or 1 Crag, 1 other, and 5 Vicious Ophidian. So, and with 1 Sharpened in our offhand. So first we have 49 Mighty, 47 Piercing, 52 Precise Strikes, 44 Thaumaturge, and 28 Master at Arms. The reason why Master at Arms is a lot lower than in previous patches is because we need Piercing now because we lost a lot of damage from Sharpened. So we need to bolster this up, especially in single target or in solo application. If you run the Lover, you don't have to have any into Piercing, or maybe just 10 or 20. You can start pumping up Master at Arms to roughly 40 before it starts hitting heavy diminishing returns. So yeah, you can kind of change up, again, based on what you're doing, what kind of gear you have, and so on. So keep in mind that there is no true ideal CP anymore unless you are in a pure raid environment with all penetration achieved and you don't need anything. Then you can change your CP to an optimal situation, but it's so rare to come across that and most players don't have access to it that it's not worth really discussing too much. So hopefully that's given you an idea about how to update your Stamina Nightblades as of the Horns of the Reach patch. Next in the next video, we'll be doing the same thing with Magic Nightblades. I'll have a little bit more discussion since we have more versatility with gear setups and so on. But hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys around. Videos like this one are made possible by the amazing support from these phenomenal people. Between my life, the game, and everything in between, I'd never be able to do as much as I can without them. Thank you to everyone for the empowerment, regardless from financial or in-game support, constructive feedback, or simple encouragement. You are all amazing.